and welcome to Bluestone's webinar on strengthening a tribal economy through housing. My name is Melissa Thompson, and I will be presenting today. So to start off, I did want to provide a little bit of background on myself as a presenter and also on Bluestone's strategy group. Yat Melissa Thompson Yenishya, na kaidina initially, Kia Ani Bashichin, Ashinhi Dashiche, Do Islana Dashinale. Hello, my name is Melissa Thompson again. I am a senior strategist with Bluestone Strategy Group. I am a member of the Navajo Nation. My background, I received a bachelor's degree in Native American Studies from Dartmouth College. I was previously a lead in NOFOA Summer Business Institute mentor, so I helped high school students participating in a mini business program at Dartmouth College for the summer. And I was also a tribal liaison specialist for Northern New Mexico on the 2010 census. So I helped out the 8 Northern Pueblos in developing programming and communication methods and gaining support from leadership to ensure that their communities received a full count. I have been working with Bluestone for 6 years now. Some of the projects I've been involved in include strategic planning projects, human resource projects, which include recruitment and compensation studies, also business assessments of casinos, trading posts, and smoke shops, and housing projects related to strategic planning and technical assistance and trainings. So Bluestone has 13 years of direct experience in Indian country, working with over 190 tribes. We are a Native majority owned and managed advisory firm with a national presence, working with tribes and tribal organizations. So to date, we have worked in 28 states across the country, including Alaska. Bluestone was co-founded by our chairman and CEO, Jamie Fulmer, who is a former chairman of the Yavapai Apache Nation, and also co-founded by our president, John Moores. We have 2 offices located in Phoenix, Arizona, and Laguna Hills, California. Those 2 offices house our core team of 9, which includes our leadership, our management, and our strategist teams. We also have a team of tribal advisors who we consult with and include on projects. They all have experience in serving as tribal leaders of their own respective nations. We also have an extensive network of subject matter experts who are assigned on a project-to-project basis based upon their areas of expertise and disciplines. So Bluestone provides 13 core service offerings, and you can see from the screen here, those different service offerings range for everything from strategic planning to governance to economic development. So for today's webinar, we are going to be focusing in that area of housing planning. And I do want to point out that we do have 2 new service offerings that have been added, which include hemp and healthcare. So we do have those service offerings we're rolling out now too. Okay, so I did want to provide a little bit of a tribal housing overview to get everybody kind of on the same baseline understanding before I go into the different areas of economic development within housing. So first, I want to go through some of the terminology you'll hear me use and you'll see on my slides. So the first one I want to go over is HUD. So that's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this is the main federal agency that promotes housing programming within Indian country. Area ONAP, so that's the Area Office of Native American Programs, and this is the one that is primarily responsible for distribution of programs for tribes across the country. And there are different areas that tribes work with, regional areas that tribes work with in getting some of those programs going. NAHASDA, Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996. This is the primary act that allows many of the housing activities within Indian country to be funded by the federal government. TDHE, so it's a tribally designated housing entity. Tribes are able to have two ways of managing housing within their community. The first option is to manage internally under the tribal government through a housing department. The second is to designate an entity, a housing entity, to manage the housing responsibilities and receive the housing funds directly to operate those. So IHBG, this is Indian Housing Block Grant Program. This is one of the primary funds under HUD that funds tribal activities related to housing. And then under the IHBG for funds, tribes are required to submit two different forms. And the first one is listed next is the IHP, so that's Indian Housing Plan. And the next is the APR, so it's the Annual Performance Report. So those two items are required if tribes are going to be using IHBG funds, and they're required on an annual basis. So IHBG is also a formula grant for affordable housing activities. ICDBG, Indian Community Development Block Grant. So this is similar to the IHBG, but it's actually more focused on community development. So there are some similar guidelines and areas within that, but it's more meant to promote community development. And the last one is NMTC, New Market Tax Credits. And I'll go into a little bit more of what new market tax credits are in the presentation, but that is another terminology I did want to have on here and have everybody aware of. So I did want to point out, when we think of tribal housing and tribal activities related to housing, one of the key points is creativity. So while the language in many of the funding documents for HUD, for things such as the IHBG or the ICDBG programs, are very open-ended, that is meant to provide tribes an opportunity to be creative in their model activities and provide creative approaches to solving affordable housing problems. So this, again, I want to emphasize that this promotes creativity and innovation in providing solutions and opportunities specifically for those tribal communities. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD receives and distributes the funds to support housing and development initiatives within Indian country. And through innovative programming, tribes have been able to create sustainable and community-driven solutions for their housing and community development challenges. So I want to point out the key phrase of sustainable and community-driven solutions. This, again, ties back to being creative, but being able to provide tailored solutions that will specifically fit those communities. So again, a lot of the funding language is kind of open-ended and vague in some areas, but that's to allow for these solutions to fit what the tribes need for their community, for their geographic region, for the different situations that they have going on. So the Indian Housing Block Grant, some of the eligible activities for that include housing development, assistance to housing, housing services, crime prevention and safety, and model activities that promote creative approaches to solving affordable housing problems. HUD also encourages necessary affordable housing related infrastructure, and those infrastructures can either support existing affordable housing units or support the development of affordable housing that will be developed in the future. So again, that's the infrastructure you can lay out to really either support the current or future housing in affordable programs. Again, with this, all model activities must benefit residents of affordable housing. Okay, so I do want to cover some of the example of model activities that are acceptable under the Indian Housing Block Grant. You can see the list there. There's a wide variety of activities that are acceptable. This list was actually part of a ONAP recipient guidance notice issued back in 2013, but many of the activities are still applicable today, and there might be even more that can be applied. So to go through them, some of them might be new housing office buildings, including rehabilitation or addition of existing office space, warehouse maintenance and storage space, daycare centers or rehab of daycare centers, again, related back to affordable housing recipients, community buildings or centers, rehabilitation of existing facilities for those community buildings or centers, master plan studies, so that would include planning for the areas and the different plans that you want to have for housing, home loan revolving funds, biomass wood space, heating plant, construction of student housing, upgrading for community generator systems or water treatment systems. So these are just, again, examples of what you could use some of those funds for and what those activities could include. You would want to include it in the Indian housing plan on what activities you plan for. But again, creativity is the key. You have some flexibility to really use these funds to build out further infrastructure, to further build out amenities needed in your community to really help build, to strengthen the residents of affordable housing. So the next one I want to cover is the Indian Community Development Block Grant Program. That's the ICDBG. So this provides direct grants for use in developing viable Indian and Alaska Native communities. And those activities can include decent housing, a suitable living environment, and economic opportunities that all benefit primarily low and moderate income persons. For this, award amounts vary between $500,000 to $5 million, with the average of about $600,000. So listed there are some of the categories that those activities that are eligible can fall into. So we have housing, community facilities, and economic development. So under housing, that again can include housing rehabilitation, land acquisition to support new housing construction, and as I mentioned earlier, some of the infrastructure to support that. And then under limited circumstances, new housing construction. Community facilities include infrastructure and multi-purpose or single community buildings. Economic development includes a wide variety of commercial, industrial, agricultural projects, which may be owned by the tribe or operated by a third party. Now, one thing with this is the funds cannot be used for construction or improvement of governmental facilities or the purchase of equipment, general government expenses, operating and maintenance expenses, or political activities. So anything that's related back to the government or political activities is basically not going to be an eligible activity. But if it goes to benefit the low-income communities and their amenities and their support services, then that might fall under there. Again, you would want to work with the HUD ONAP offices to clarify some of your opportunities and make sure that, or it does go to benefit some of those affordable housing and low-income to mid-income communities. So in this presentation and through the examples I'm going to share, there are three key themes I want to emphasize. The first is the correlation between housing and the local economy and how it plays a large part of tribal members creating livelihoods, supporting their families, and staying connected to their communities. So for many American Indian people, their tribal communities provide a basis for their cultural identities and values. Ensuring that those communities are providing conditions that foster well-being is important. And the second point is today's tribal housing departments and TDHEs are becoming so much more involved in creating communities that are healthy, safe, and secure for their tribal members. So traditionally, housing departments focused on managing their existing housing stock rentals. But today, housing is focused on many more aspects related to the health and well-being of community members, the community overall, and having those impacts on the local economy. And the third point, again, is creativity and innovation are essential in developing out-of-the-box solutions to addressing housing issues in tribal communities and impacting the tribal economy. So I want to wrap up the overview section with this quote because I feel like it pinpoints exactly how housing and the economy are intertwined. So the programmatic approach to housing and economic development, which is so often piecemeal and fragmented, should be replaced by policies that foster a comprehensive and strategic approach to addressing the multiple and interconnected housing and economic issues confronting Indian country. In order to make the most effective impacts, having a strategic plan or approach in place would be the best practice for tribal housing departments and TDHE. And I'll go into some of the planning aspects at the end of this next steps area. Okay, so there are 4 areas I want to touch on related to economic development areas within housing. And the first is going to be local multiplier effect. The second is developing community services. The third is workforce development. And the fourth one is economic development. We'll start off with the local multiplier effect. And the local multiplier effect is the concept of spending and keeping money circulating in the tribal economy. So it's once you spend a dollar somewhere in your tribal economy, having that dollar cycle back into another area of the tribal economy and keep rotating it within that tribal economy. So it's being spent in the same tribal economy and going to many different sources and basically revolving around that dollar in the economy. So the first opportunity for that I have here is employment and contracting. Again, this is contributing to the local multiplier effect. So as part of the procurement process, tribes are able to enact a preference for tribal businesses and tribal hiring contracting. An example of this would be if the tribe were to use a tribally owned or tribal member owned construction firm to develop new housing or conduct renovations on their existing housing stock. This really does spur the local multiplier effect in keeping those funds inside the tribal economy rather than outsourcing to a third party that's going to have those dollars and funds leave that local economy. So I want to cover a little bit of the language as far as what's included in the HASDA in regards to Indian preference and tribal preference in employment contracting. So under IHBG regulations, it does require that tribes and TDHEs give preference in the award of contracts or subcontracts for projects funded under the IHBG program to Indian organizations and Indian-owned economic enterprises. So as long as you're using IHBG funds, you do have to have that preference set aside of using Indian organizations and Indian-owned economic enterprises. However, there is a section, it's section 101K of the NAHASA Act, that authorizes tribal preference in employment and contracting when using IHBG funds. So that would include preference to specifically that tribe's tribal members or tribally owned businesses. So tribes can adopt a tribal preference law, regulation, or ordinance governing preference in employment and contracting under IHBG program. Tribes can also specifically outline some of the preferences in reduction in workforce and layoffs under this as well. So this would be applicable to the current COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of tribes had to furlough or lay off some of their employees. And if they did have a tribal preference policy as it related to any of their IHBG program funds, they are allowed to have an outline preference of who is laid off first or any reduction in their workforce. You can find further details of the enforcement requirements and applicability through recipient notices and area ONAP offices, and they can further clarify anything you have on this as well. But yeah, basically, if a tribe does have a tribal preference policy, it is required that the TDHE or the housing department follow that in lieu of the Indian preference. The second area for tribes to kind of work with that multiplier effect and keeping those dollars in-house is for the housing department or TDHE to provide in-house services for the tribes. So some of those potential areas could include construction, landscaping, renovation, and waste management. If the housing department provides these services already, there are opportunities for them to provide them for the tribe overall. And some of these activities could then potentially be charged back to the tribe. So again, it's keeping that dollar in-house, not outsourcing to a third party, and being able to provide those services all from the tribal government or the tribal designated entity. So the next area I want to go into is developing community services. So community is an important building block to wellness and stability, as well as building foundation for economic growth. Tribal housing departments and TDHEs really have the opportunity to provide a safe and secure community, as well as provide amenities that allow tribal members to enhance their opportunities and become active members in the workforce. Some examples of that would be having law enforcement measures such as security patrols for communities, developing housing for at-risk tribal members, and then amenities could include items like childcare. But overall, providing safe, secure community is also important to ensure that tribe members are not at risk of becoming victims of crime themselves. Overall, activities such as these provide security and safety, which promote neighborhood development, but are also providing jobs and creating an attractive environment for the establishment of future homes and businesses. So you're really trying to make the environment safe and secure, but you're also attracting those outside entities to move into that local economy. So this first example is with the Catawba Indian Nation. So in 2014, the Catawba Indian Nation received a $600,000 ICDBG award to expand their existing daycare and Head Start program. The purpose was to provide expectant and current mothers who work outside of the home adequate care and educational opportunities for the children ages 0 to 3. The Catawba Indian Nation is located in the state of South Carolina, and this project was anticipated to create an additional 300,000 square feet to house an early Head Start program, as well as additional 2,300 square feet for learning and another 700 square feet for office space. So again, it's expanding their existing building to accommodate more. The expansion was forecasted to allow tribes to serve up to 100 children from the 56 children already being served prior to that expansion. So it's almost doubled that capacity to serve children. And again, with childcare, if it's within that affordable housing community or mid to low income community, you can really use that to benefit parents who need to work, who have part-time work or anything like that. But it gives them a place to have their children go so that they can pursue workforce development opportunities. My next example here is from the Muckleshoot tribe. The Muckleshoot tribe is located in Washington State, and just at the end of 2019, they had received $5 million in IHBG program funding. Now, this money was to serve the purpose of building 30 housing units committed to families or individuals in recovery and families working on active reunification. So again, this is an example of how they use their IHBG program to combat the housing issues that specifically plague tribal communities, and in particular, those that qualify as low income. So building upon the community, strengthening community, and really supporting families within that affordable housing area helps to, again, these individuals who are recovering or in active reunification. Safety and security. So I have two different tribal examples here. So the Elk Valley Rancheria, which is located in Central California, received $605,000 in ICDBG funding award. The purpose of that fund was to rehabilitate their existing fire station and purchase fire equipment. And then the Colorado River Indian Tribe, which is located along the Arizona and California border, had received $825 in ICDBG funding awards. And the purpose for that was to construct a fire safety substation. And if you see off to the right there, there is a picture of their newly developed fire substation. So that's something that's come to fruition. This announcement was made in 2015 of the funding awards. So since then, this is what they've been able to develop. My next example is of the Karuk tribe. So they are located in Northern California. In 2018, the Karuk Tribe Housing Authority opened a wellness center, which included a gymnasium, kitchen, and computer lab, and exercise room. So they were able to leverage new market tax credits and funds received through HUD's IHBG. So new market tax credits are a federal financial program. The goal of them is to stimulate business and real estate investment in low-income communities. And the New Market Tax Credit Program attracts capital to low-income communities by providing private investors with a federal tax credit for investments made in businesses or economic development projects located in some of the most distressed communities in the nation, which includes most tribal communities. But through creating an investment partnership between the Karuk Tribe, the Karuk Tribe Housing Authority, Travoy, which is another firm, and Capital One Bank for the project, they were able to build this out. So you can see on the right side there, there's a picture of their newly developed wellness center and their grand opening that they held back in 2018. So for the COVID-19 public health crisis that's currently going on, there was a recently passed CARES Act that contained a variety of initiatives to assist Indian country during this most difficult time. The bill included a total of $300 million for housing-related activities, and specifically the bill provided an additional $200 million to the IHBG formula and $100 million earmarked for non-competitive ICDBG funds. And the intention of those funds is to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus for emergencies that constitute imminent threat to health and safety. So again, that's specifically what the purpose of these funds are. There is some creativity that tribes can apply to really help out their communities with those funds. And here are some of the examples that our team was able to come up with. We do have subject matter experts who have many, many years of working with HUD and working in HUD as well as federal funding agencies. So with this, we have a couple examples of staff salaries and expenses for planning and response, purchasing PPE, which is the personal protective equipment necessary for the staff to administer their programs, purchasing of cleaning supplies, such as disinfectant, sanitizers, waste disposal supplies, other supplies to disinfect homes, common areas, and housing-related public facilities. There are announcements being updated constantly as this is an ongoing pandemic and health crisis right now. So I did include the link where you can go and they have the announcements coming out regularly there as well. But we do also have on the Bluestone website in the news section an article that has further examples of how these funds could be used and specifically how Bluestone can help in the areas of planning and addressing some of these issues. Okay, so the next area I want to go into is discussing workforce development as part of how that economic development is related to housing. TDHEs or housing departments have an opportunity to support residents in achieving self-sufficiency in maintaining their financial, household, employment, and personal stability. So there's three different areas that can really contribute within workforce development. The first is workforce training for jobs in the local area. So building a workforce that is trained and capable of the jobs in the local area is valuable in building the multiplier effect of that community. The second one there, teach skills and knowledge in areas such as debt management, financial literacy, and credit repair. So having tribal members gain these skills and knowledge empowers them to become self-sufficient. And this will be extremely valuable for those tribal members or members of the community looking to become new homeowners. The third part is tribal youth connected projects that focus on preparing youth to become contributing members of their community. So tribal youth connected projects could be including general skill building such as life skills, higher education pursuits, and leadership opportunities. We have seen one tribe use those funds and include the youth in actually building out some of their culturally significant structures for their ceremonies going forward. So the youth were actually the ones constructing along with some of their crew there. So they learned how to build some of those structures for future ceremonies and just have that general skill, but also know how to build in general, getting some of that construction experience. So some funding opportunities will even offset the cost of hiring individuals to further develop these programs for housing services. An example of that would be the ROSS program, which is the Resident Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency Program, that will help offset the cost of hiring a service coordinator. So again, there's opportunities to use these fundings in very different areas, whether it be internal for staffing or development of new structures or even just educational aspects. So an example of this I pulled was from the Pascua Yaqui tribe. So the Pascua Yaqui tribe is located in Arizona, and in 2019 they had done a demonstration project where they constructed a home completely out of energy efficient building materials called EF blocks. So the company that developed those blocks helped train the housing staff in how to build these houses with eco-friendly materials so that future homes could be built using their in-house staff. So again, the tribal housing staff learned how to do this so that they can do it in the future rather than contract out consistently to that specific vendor or any other future third-party services. They used a combination of tribal loans and non-program income to build these homes. And then they also had used proceeds from low-income tax credit allocations to fund 5plex. So this is an example of building the workforce to keep future work in-house rather than outsourcing. And also the tribe used this project to demonstrate it can build houses using its own employees and that it can boost home ownership for those that want to live on the reservation by selling those homes to tribal members. So again, it's building out the workforce, but at the same time attracting more individuals to come into the reservation and live there, and hence building out the opportunity for that multiplier effect to grow and building out the local economy. So there are some exceptions within the IHBG that allow assistance for certain employees. So the first would be through law enforcement officers. So through the funds, tribes can use some of the IHBG funds to provide housing for law enforcement officers under certain circumstances that determine that it is beneficial to have them living in the community and that it would deter criminal activity. The second opportunity is to use funds to provide housing assistance to a household whose presence is considered essential to the well-being of the area. For example, medical professional, if it's somewhere remote and they can't otherwise reasonably meet the housing needs to join that area and work there. So again, this is providing opportunities to bringing outside workforce and professionals into the community to better the community and also build, again, local economy and building on that multiplier effect. So the last area I want to touch on as far as economy and housing is under economic development. Economic development through the ICDBG program. So there are a number of activities under economic development, including a wide variety of commercial, industrial, and agricultural projects, which may be owned or operated by the tribe or TDHE, or operated by a third party that would be eligible under this program for funding. So my first example is of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians, who are located in northern Wisconsin. So in 2019, they were awarded $543,000. The purpose of this was for renovation and expansion of a commercial fishing dock and improvements to its access road. This project was part of a larger plan for them to build out their tribal economy by developing a fish processing plant rather than contract through a middle party. So before this, any fish the tribe would reel in was sold to a local distributor who would then turn and sell those to local restaurants. So now the tribe, by building this out and then developing the processing plant, was able to streamline the process of catching the fish and providing to table, basically, for restaurants. This project would have allowed for licensed tribal fishers to earn a higher income on their catches, as well as give tribes more local control on their local fishing industry and distribution of fresh fish. So because they've cut out that middle person in the process, they're able to pay the tribal fishers a higher income for their catches. So this is a perfect example of how having a strategic plan in place and knowing what goals need to be achieved to accomplish that strategic plan has worked for a tribe. This housing funding was able to fund completion of one of the goals as part of the larger strategic plan and to build economic development. And you can see there on the right side, the top picture is the dock before, and the bottom picture is the dock after the renovations. By developing that and improving the infrastructure there, they're able to provide more commercial fishing opportunities. So my next example is the Keweenaw Bay Ojibwa Housing Authority. In 2013, they were awarded $600,000 in the ICDBG funding. And the purpose of those funds was to develop a gas station / convenience store that would provide convenience to less served tribal members in the eastern portion of their lands, as well as add 6 new jobs, and with the profits from that C-store earmarked to support long-term operations at their newly developed community hall. So this is a great example of the multiplier effect in that, and also job creation. So with the multiplier effect, customers come in, they purchase food or gas, and so those funds get transferred over to the store, and the store in turn then pays the employee's paycheck, but also part of those funds go to funding the community hall operations. So you can see both of those are internal work streams. And to keep it going, maybe that employee spends the dollar back at local tribal business. So overall, that multiplier effect is getting fueled within the local tribal economy. So my next example here is the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and they are located in Oklahoma. So in 2016, they received ICDBG funds of $800,000. Now, the purpose of those funds was to develop a micro enterprise program that would provide loans to Native American-owned businesses in Oklahoma and work toward the development and retention of jobs. One thing with the micro enterprise program is they were also going to be providing financial and small business counseling in order to establish financial understanding and responsibility of their clients. So I want to include this quote here from their press release page. In providing these funding opportunities to entrepreneurs in our local communities, we're able to directly address low and moderate income Native American business owners' needs when it comes to finding capital to get their business going. Consequently, this will lead to increased hiring and economic stimulation in our communities. So this is an example of how housing can provide opportunities for entrepreneurs with microloans and technical assistance in setting up their businesses and also supporting the local tribal entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is a key aspect of growing a local economy in many different communities. So I wanted to wrap that section up with showing this economic housing cycle. So these are all the different examples in the areas that I touched on. And you can see from tribal preference or Indian preference and tribal preference to internalizing functions, and then child care center development, the supportive housing development example, the examples of providing housing for essential families, building out fire stations, the safety facilities, wellness center, and then also providing the self-sufficiency education to tribal members, providing workforce training, and having that youth connection to the workforce as well as to housing and economic development. And then economic development, developing that fishing dock and providing that opportunity for streamlining processes, encouraging entrepreneurship, the gas station convenience store example with the multiplier effect, and the micro enterprise program really fueling entrepreneurship and also the opportunity for Native American businesses to thrive. So you can see all of this is within the housing realm. And again, it does rely on creativity and being able to provide out-of-the-box solutions for the tribal communities. But they all relate back and contribute to that housing economic cycle. And as you can see there with the graphics in the center, we do have, there's really a community being developed in neighborhood. And so that community development is a huge aspect to attracting more people to the community to come back and live on the reservations, developing the workforce further, and also attracting businesses that want to work within that community as well. Just kind of wanted to show this to tie all those examples together of how they can contribute back to the economy. So I want to talk about a couple other possible funding sources for housing to look into, apart from the ones I've already mentioned. So we have the Rural Innovation Fund, the Title VI Loan Guarantee Programs. I talked a little bit about the ROSS program, the Resident Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency Program, and supportive housing for the elderly. So again, the purpose of all these programs is to provide assistance and capacity from the housing standpoint. I would recommend also contacting the area ONAP office for options for funding housing activities and requesting technical assistance or training and moving forward with planning and implementation of your housing opportunities. Next steps. So these are some of the next steps our team had developed in addressing economy and housing. So we would recommend first, starting out with having a housing economic development planning session. So understanding what opportunities for economic development there are within the housing realm. Next would be conducting a housing assessment and identifying those opportunities and priorities that you want to have as far as the housing department is concerned or the TDHE is concerned. We recommend reviewing the organizational structure that currently houses your housing responsibility for improvements or expansion, including org charts, additional personnel if needed, job descriptions, and making sure that the programs and services you're offering are what you want to be in. If there's more programs you want to offer, if there's maybe something that doesn't quite fit anymore or needs to be altered, again, reviewing those opportunities. The next part would be to gain community input for housing and community amenity needs. Bluestone does have a lot of experience in community outreach, and we do that through attending tribal events, community events, tribal member surveys, focus groups with tribal members, and also local community members, tribal and government employees, youth, elders. We definitely have done projects where we have included various demographics to get further insight into some of these opportunities. We then recommend developing a strategic plan for housing, which includes the vision, goals, and actionable items. And from that, really identifying those top priorities that the housing department or TDHE would like to focus on. After that, we do recommend any of those top priorities, you conduct feasibility analyses for each of them and conduct financial analyses for funding requirements to accomplish those. And in the end, developing an implementation plan to really get things moving forward. So understanding the steps A through Z of what it's going to take to get that implemented and the timelines, responsibilities, and tasks associated with that. Okay, so that concludes my presentation here on the economy and tribal housing. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact us. You can visit our website. We have a lot of information there regarding our different services that we have, as well as testimonials and case studies. And our news section has some of the newest thought leadership that our team has developed and sent out. You can also send us an email at info@bluestonestrategy.com. If you'd like more information, just reach out to us, and you can also give us a call. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that this information is very helpful to you and your tribal communities. Thank you and have a good day.